Well, we're back again for round three of our interview. Um, SPM, we're talking about the Society for Prospective Medicine.
Right. For many years, I had put together a periodic directory of health risk appraisal instruments where we sent out requests to all the known providers of instruments to send us write ups about their instruments, and we published it as a directory for the Society of Prospective Medicine. But it evolved, and it evolved ultimately into what became not just a directory, but a handbook where there were chapters written by various people on different health assessment tools, including health risk appraisals. And you offered to collaborate with me on that, and you brought a whole new dimension to it, Jack. In the past, people had just simply mailed in their information, but you wanted to create a electronic template that people would fill out and submit. And it was really at the cutting edge of the internet and the cutting edge of electronic uh, manuscript submissions. But it definitely was a jolt to all the organizations that we were asking to submit in a certain format their uh, their submissions. So you really led us into the future, and yet it was frustrating for a lot of the little purveyors of HRAs. Do you remember that?
Dimly, this was about 97, 98, I think, and email was just getting really going in the
Right.
internet. And yeah, I wasn't about to type all of their paper submissions into a computer or have someone else do it. It just seemed more sensible to have them email it. And then we also had people writing chapters, and we had to teach them how to use track changes so we could edit their work and they could see what we edited and decide if they agreed or not. So it was quite a learning curve with electronics. That was a new thing with Word having the track changes feature. So I remember near the end, when this was before laser printers were cheap enough that you could have one, you had to go to Kinko's and
Right.
print it out
Right.
and uh, then look at the errors that you couldn't see, redo it and print it out. And we were up late into the night. We wound up staying in a motel next to the Kinko's on Route 29 in Charlottesville and getting it in the morning. I guess what we had to FedEx it or something. I don't
We had to
remember.
send it to Sewickley, Pennsylvania, because they
Oh,
had a publishing deadline.
mm-hmm. And
But it was a very substantial piece of work. It was more than a directory, and without your help, it never could have gotten to be the substantial reference book that it became.
yeah, it's a big fat book, 8.5 by 11, and
Yeah.
you find it on Amazon every now and then for about $200. They ran out of them. They're becoming very valuable. Uh,
But I really enjoyed collaborating together with you, and I guess that's why I was willing to consider the next venture which you posed to me after you had been working with the Mother Friendly Childbirth Initiative.
right, and that was back in 96. I went to the final meeting where all the alternative birthing organizations had been getting together to see if they could come up with a single best practices document called the Mother Friendly Childbirth Initiative, which we put together at this meeting with a projector when projectors were new and um, editing as a group. It was amazing. Suzanne Arms, who I met at that meeting, and we were doing a hot tub together, and we had this idea: what about if we could do this not just for birth, but preconception, gestation, the postpartum period, the so-called fourth trimester, and even up through adolescent um, initiations, which don't happen other than getting a driver's license. And we thought that would be a brilliant idea. We tossed it around for 2 or 3 years by email, and then I finally wanted to get a group together and dragged you, somewhat kicking and streaming, to into this group. You're claiming you didn't know anything about it, but in fact you did. So And without you, I don't think it had ever gotten off the ground. So say more about what.
Well, you invited us to come to the Acorn Inn, which was not far from my house, not far from where you lived. And I think you lured us all by having Joseph Chilton Pierce agree to meet with us for one of our evenings. So we met there, and I remember there were really two questions that we were posing. The first was, if you got the world's experts together, could they actually agree on basic principles of what we were at that meeting calling optimal parenting? That is the optimal way to bring a new being into human life. And then the second question was, even if the experts did agree, could you actually form an alliance or a network or a coalition of organizations that could collaborate in getting a common message out and advocating a change in cultural values toward birthing and parenting? And I think the first 2.5 days of our meeting clearly demonstrated that yes, we could agree. And Ray Castellino brought an overhead projector and a
video
screen,
projector.
a video projector, and we
Brand
actually
new.
did edit as a group. It was quite
Yeah.
an amazing experience to see in front of us what we were writing, and we all became very focused on wordsmithing. But out of that, we did come up with a declaration, which I think at the next meeting in Colorado became, what was it called?
No, the next meeting was San Francisco,
Right,
Colorado.
at Marilyn Milos'.
Yeah. The proclamation was the term we eventually boiled it down to, of describing the problem and what needed to be done. And then we put together a blueprint of about 100 different actions that was quite a massive piece of work. Altogether, I figured we'd spend about 10,000 hours. The 13 of us editing it over the phone for about 2 years.
Right, and Sharon Humanik, who became the president of this new organization that we formed called the Alliance for TLC, the Alliance for Transforming the Lives of Children, she had her graduate students in Richmond doing semester-long projects of looking for the scientific evidence, the best published articles to underpin the various recommended practices. So it was really an evidence-based set of recommendations, much in keeping with the scientific rigor of the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force.
Well, and she was the editor of a journal, a nursing. She was a chair of maternal and child health at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond.
Right, and she edited a journal, and I think, what was it, 1 or 2 special editions of the journal contained the results of our and her students' work.
Yeah, so we were very fortunate to stumble on her. I met her in Florida at one of the Mother Friendly Childbirth reunions. She wasn't actually at the original meeting, but we would get together every year, and I picked her out of the crowd.
A great choice.
And she was in Wyoming at that time, but then she moved to Virginia, and so she was right down the road, and we got her involved. But she wasn't at the first Acorn Inn meeting, was she? I think it was. She must have been.
I think she was.
Yeah. So we managed to put together 13 people to form a founding board of directors, and we had the other meeting in San Francisco, and then we were doing a lot of phone editing. I was in Australia for much of that time, and this was before Zoom or even Skype, so it was all audio, and that was tricky with me typing what we came up with and then reading it back, and someone would insert a different word, and it was tedious, but we did it.
But we had a number of meetings, and whenever we did, Suzanne Arms wanted us to get together, to live together, to cook together, to meet together, so that we were really forming a little family.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very memorable meetings. I know 2 of them in Colorado, and then one at my house in Virginia.
Yeah. And then after we got the documents published, and they're downloadable on the ATLC website, atlc.org, Suzanne had the idea of a summit, of bringing together. Oh, the other piece of the whole alliance was an alliance of organizations, of affiliates.
And that was your project.
Yeah, I went after every organization that had something to do with childbirth and child rearing that shared our values as opposed to the mainstream coercion parenting. Pam came up with a connection parenting idea. It was attachment parenting, which William and Martha Sears pretty much, they coined it after Jean Lidloff said that they couldn't use the continuum concept, which actually wasn't very self-explanatory. And then Pam took it a step further with her book.
And called it connection parenting.
Yeah. And there's a wonderful interview with her on the ATLC website, hopefully. It'll still be there by the time this is viewed. And you can get a real good sense of it or get the book. They're just doing a...
Right, she wrote a book about connection parenting, but she did not like to give presentations, but she loved to be interviewed. So she took the titles of each of the chapters of her book, and her former husband interviewed her and asked one question that was suggestive of each chapter, and then she just went on in her extraordinarily articulate and engaging way. And it's a beautiful summary of a beautiful book.
Well, I think that was around the same time that Suzanne had the idea for the summit. And I had put together, I think, about 80 organizations at that point, and a few well-known individuals that were on their own. So we invited them to come together in Santa Barbara, and we used Joe Pierce again as bait, and I managed to get Michel Audin, who was the father of Waterbirth, to come, and with these attractions, and a few other name recognition people, we brought up.
We had almost 100 people.
Yeah,
and we used this very intriguing method that you were familiar with, of the World Cafe.
Yeah, my friend David Isaacs and his partner Juanita had just put this together. It was still growing. Now it's worldwide, and they've actually retired from it and let it take over on its own, where we would have people 4 at a table with a butcher paper on the tabletop and colored pens. They would brainstorm a question and write down their conclusions. Then we would, after 20 minutes, 3 of the 4 people would go to a different table. You'd have one person stay at that table as a scribe and continue to, well, the new group would look at what the first group had come up with and expand it. And after 3 rounds, then we'd have a sharing with a graphic artist with an enormous wall-sized piece of paper, collect all the data that the individual tables would share and put it all together. And it's amazing. These people that know how to do this are just astounding. They'll draw pictures and diagrams, and they're beautiful. We actually have pictures of them on the website. And so the question would be collectively answered by the group in this amazing cafe process. So we did that, and then we scheduled another one. That was 2003, I think, in June in Santa Barbara. We did a second one in Santa Cruz area, and what we discovered was the enormous amount of work it took to put the thing together on a budget, and we just couldn't keep it up. We had volunteers, but I was the main coordinator, and it was way more work than I could continue to do on a regular basis. So both of those, the recordings of them are on the website, and they were life-changing, I think, for some of the attendees who had never encountered, like birthing professionals that hadn't encountered other disciplines like early childhood homeschooling or unschooling or
Co-sleeping in beds.
family bed, all of that.
But the process of the cafe meant that every single participant was actively engaged, writing down their ideas, meeting new people, discussing the ideas, and then going from table to table to table. So over the course of 2 days, they got to know a large number of people.
Yeah, that was quite an experience. Then the last project that we undertook was the warm line, where we thought rather than the hotline, this would be, which is usually for someone in crisis, mothers who are frustrated because
it's
the
12
family
o'clock.
Sorry about that interruption, folks. The collection of no, I've completely lost my train of concept.
Oh, the warm line.
The warm line, yes. Too many distractions here with technology. We wanted to give coaching advice to mothers, and what we discovered is that the nuclear family is a disaster for raising kids, that it's a recent experiment, less than 100 years. It's overwhelming. I think it takes 3.87 adults per infant to meet everyone's needs, so do the math. And we encountered from our own experience and also friends that the parents need support, and so many marriages end because of the lack of that.
Right, so we had this idea that if people had a hotline to call and ask for advice, particularly when they were in a crisis with kids, that it might be really very helpful. And rather than calling it a hotline, we decided it would be warm and engaging. So we developed a training curriculum. We trained about, a half a dozen or a dozen people who were ready to be coaches. And we actually launched it, and there was very little interest.
Well, we never got the medium to advertise it. We were going for a grant that would make it possible to get it out there, and it was just a small word of mouth. And we didn't get the grant, so at that point, things went on to hibernation. The website's still there.
However, ATLC has continued to do other projects. One of them was a program, a committee that Ray Castellino chaired, in which we decided to interview experts, some of the aging experts, and also some exemplary families who were trying to use the principles of ATLC, the blueprint principles. And so we did about 20 interviews, which are recorded, and we had a common introduction by one of the members of the committee, and those are just about to be pulled together and released on YouTube. And the other thing that you started, Jack, was what became called the CCC. Was it the connection? Tell us about that.
Well, the ATLC people were mostly involved in some form of connection, and the support that we needed to connect with each other was lacking. We had that when ATLC was working together, like building our documents and organizing our events, but then that stopped. And so I thought, well, with the advent of the internet, and I think we were originally just using phone lines. It was later that we got into Zoom. I rounded up about 20 people, invited them to join us, and we had a couple of initial calls, and some people said it was too touchy-feely, and other people said it wasn't touchy-feely enough, and it boiled down to half and half. We'd share what was going on with each other as we got to know each other, and then we would address a topic that was of interest, like Ray brought in the polyvagal theory and so forth. That was probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Right, that's been ongoing now for a long time. It's become a very powerful support group. We've brought in a number of guests, and some of them have stayed, and others simply came and met with us and then went on their way. But that's ongoing. And so ATLC, which is now how many years old?
99, and he's 26 years old.
Well, hard to believe.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears. The next thing you got me involved in was the Mankind Project.
Well, but I didn't acknowledge that without your organizational skills and nonprofit organization, ATLC would not have gotten off the ground. You claimed you didn't know anything about attachment parenting, but you'd sort of done it on your own without even having a name for it. So what you discovered, I think, was just formalization of principles that you'd already done with your kids, and you brought all these skills. So you were the godfather of ATLC with your corporate and organizational skills. So couldn't have done it without you. But as I said,
well, thank you.
We're brothers with a different mother, and another opportunity to work together after we'd done the book editing. So Mankind Project, during the first summit, I roomed with a dear friend for many years, and somehow the New Warriors Adventure Training, which I'd heard about, the subject came up at the meeting, and Skip said that he had done it and he hated it, but he noticed 6 months later that his life had changed. And that caught my attention. I had heard about it, but I thought, warriors, running around in the woods, acting like wild men, that doesn't interest me. Turned out that the term warrior is used as a warrior with your shadow. And this organization, like Pathwork, are the two organizations nationally I know of that actually address shadow. So I did the training. I think it was in 2004. Yeah,
you did it in California, and
yeah.
I came to your graduation.
Right, and so you got interested. Then I was out here visiting, and discovered there was what are called integration groups, or I groups, that are weekly meetings of people that have been through the training to support their ongoing growth and evolution. And where I had lived in an intentional community about a half hour out of Charlottesville, Shannon Farm, 3 of the men there had formed an I group. And I had known them when we lived there, and then I moved to Australia. And I had experienced these men very differently in this intense group, and thought, wow, if I'd only been able to connect with them then when I lived there. And I invited you to, as a guest, to one of the meetings, and take it away.
Well, for me, it was like a duck in water. I remember so vividly coming as a guest. We all met outside, and we were smudged with sage. We honored the different directions, and that became a ritual, a weekly ritual that I liked so much that we incorporated into our wedding ceremony. Then we went inside, sat down on the floor in backjacks, and the question was raised, who's going to lead our meeting tonight? Because we did not have a formal leader. We did not have formal dogma. So it was very spontaneous, but it was built around a series of rituals or rounds. And the first one was check-in. So normally you think about people checking in as talking about what's going on in their life and what they're doing, but no. This was a check-in where we began with an animal name, because during our weekend training, we had each identified a totem animal. For me, it was, I think when I first started, hawk soaring with magic. Later, years later, when I was going into a deeply reflective period, I became inchworm. And I just wanted to spend my time thinking about taking one step in front of another. And a year later, I changed it to humble inchworm. Then later, my worm became a pupa. So my animal token was a pupa. And then finally, I did emerge from the pupa, and I became Grateful Dragon. So we began by introducing ourselves with our token names and then our feelings. Are you feeling mad? Are you feeling glad? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling afraid or guilty or ashamed? And it was such an amazing way for men to come together on a regular basis and immediately start by talking about how they felt. We were really being open and being real and into our feelings, which is where women were so far advanced ahead of most groups of men. And then another part of this was accountability. We would make stretches to do something, and we would state publicly what we were going to be working on, what we were going to be doing, and then when we came back together, we would have to say whether we were in integrity with what we had committed to or not. And then another part of that was clearings, and that was one of your favorite things, Jack.
Yeah, because I had been interested in the shadow from way back in the 80s when I read Michael Ventura's Shadow Dancing in the USA, and we were doing workshops with helping professionals from domination to partnership, and the dominator model is based on an unacknowledged shadow. And so learning to eat your shadow or own it, because we tend to project it onto other people. If there's someone you really admire, you're probably projecting your gold shadow onto them, or you hate them and want to kill them. It's probably something in you. And Byron Katie's work is really good at owning that. And so fit right in with Mankind Project, because a clearing, you look around the room and see if you had anything going on with another man in the circle that was preventing you from being fully present.
And feeling fully safe.
Yeah. So if you did, you'd ask that man if he'd be willing to work with you to clear your internal stuff, and then there'd be another man you'd choose to monitor it, and you'd stand facing each other, holding a staff that connected you without actually touching, and then own what's going on for you and what you're projecting. And the other man's job is just to be there as a support. And it's not about blaming him. If you're angry at him, it's probably something within you. And it's a fantastic process to get to the bottom of what's upsetting you. And of course, you and I are excellent shadow projectors of each other, so we spend a lot of time clearing.
Well, it's amazing to be doing a clearing with somebody and saying, I'm having issues with you. I'm feeling unsafe. I'm feeling angry. I'm frustrated with you. And let me tell you how bad you are. But that's not what the purpose of a clearing is. The purpose of a clearing is to say, will you help me with my work? And the facilitator keeps the attention focused on the person who's doing the clearing. What are the objective data that you can both agree on? What are your feelings, and where are you feeling them in your body? And what are your judgments about this person? What are your judgments about yourself? And then who's standing behind that person? Who does that person remind you of? Ultimately, we're looking for the gold in ourselves. What's the unfinished work that we have not yet done in ourselves that comes out when we react to another person? And I think the clearing process is the most effective conflict resolution technique that I've ever experienced.
Well, there's a lot of parallels with NVC and with Byron Katie's work as well, but this is just men, so it's a tougher nut to crack, since women are generally more open to this kind of stuff. But
well, I'm so grateful that you got me into the local I group, and as a result of that, of course, I had to eventually do their weekend training, which is based on the model of the hero's journey. So you leave your familiar surroundings and you go into the unknown. You have absolutely no idea what you're going to encounter or what you're going to expect. But I did the training, and I did it so that I could continue to be a part of that I group. And Jack, I think I've been part of that group now for 18 years. So it has really been a beautiful, stabilizing influence in my life. As a group of men, we will do anything to support each other, help each other when we're in crisis, and to really spur each other on to continue growing. So thank you for introducing me to that.
Well, and that continues to be a tool that we use just between the two of us, because I'm in Australia most of the year and occasionally get to an I group maybe once a year with you. But as we uncover more of our shadow issues, and also with the path work, the different psychological types that actually come out of bioenergetic analysis and the core energetics, we're ideally suited to reflect each other's shadow. And man, have we done it in the past. We went through a period where we didn't even talk. But it's allowed us to grow and mature and love each other more. And even now with COVID, having different views on the big picture, it was challenging. And I come here every year for a week to or more to reconnect with old friends, and we stay together, and we have kind of our own little I group with our partners, and going deep with each other.
Right. Well, during COVID, certainly your ideas were unconventional with many of the views of the metadocs, and some of the metadocs sort of dismissed you as a conspiracy theorist, and you and I had to decide what we agreed on, what we did not agree on, and when you came one year, we even agreed that we would not talk about vaccines or certain other topics. But when we had our intimate meetings, what we discovered was that I really wasn't fully hearing you, and you wanted to be seen and heard and appreciated for your beliefs. And you were not really hearing me, and I did not feel seen and heard. And once we both recognized that, we could relax and we could spend our time focusing on truly befriending each other rather than trying to have a total agreement on any particular topic. So it's been a long and fruitful relationship that has extended for 40, many decades.
46 years, I think. So,
and we're not done yet.
I sure hope not.
You've maintained your energy, you've maintained your brilliant mind, and so far I've done the same thing. So we're in our early 80s now, very grateful that our bodies may have been beginning to crumble, but our energy and our minds have held strong.
So just to wrap it up, while you came into this from the inside with your corporate connections with conventional public health and preventive medicine and all the things we've talked about, and I coming at it from the outside as pretty much a rebel and the slayer of sacred cows, we really match each other well to address what came to be called wellness and is now somewhat distorted, and hope that will have a long-lasting influence in the future generations that I hope will be seeing these videos. Do you have any more to say about wellness and you?
Well, I think that we are fortunate to be children of the 60s. We're a generation that questioned tradition, that questions authority. It's perfect for setting you up as someone who challenges and questions everything that's conventionally accepted. Reminds me of Sir William Osler when he addressed his students at the University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater, and later at Hopkins. He said, so we are giving you the absolute best possible education. We're telling you absolutely everything that comes from tradition and from modern science, and we believe that about 50% of it is totally accurate and 50% of it is old wives' tales. The only problem is we don't know which half is which. So your job as physicians and your lifelong learning is to continue to inquire. Use your own judgment. Continue to question. And don't get stuck with what you think you know. So we're a product of this generation. And I'm so grateful that we've been alive during this time. And it's been wonderful to have this friendship with all the sparks that it has included over so many years, Jack.
Yeah, well, thank you, brother. I appreciate this opportunity to dive deeply with you.
Good.
Stop the recording.